There's coincidence, like running into a friend at the store, and then there are moments that feel less like chance and more like a glitch in reality's code. We're talking about the times the universe seemed to write a punchline, repeat a character, or deliver a piece of mail 70 years late just to mess with someone. These are 49 historically documented cases where probability was thrown out the window, leaving behind stories that are too bizarre to be made up. 1. You know how people say they had a bad dream? Well, Abraham Lincoln had the bad dream. In 1865, just days before his death, he told his wife and friends about a chillingly specific vision. He dreamed of a funeral in the White House, with mourners gathered around a casket. When he asked a soldier in the dream who had died, the reply was stark: the president. This wasn't some vague premonition. This was a full-dress rehearsal in his subconscious. 3 days later, John Wilkes Booth turned that dream into a national tragedy. It's one thing for the universe to send a warning. It's another for it to send a detailed itinerary. 2. We all complain about the mail being slow, but this is next level. In 2008, a New York woman received a postcard that her great-aunt had mailed during World War II. That's a 70-year delivery window. Apparently, it got stuck in the system, probably behind a couch in a sorting facility. When the post office finally delivered it, the woman was overcome with emotion. Her family had talked about this specific lost postcard for generations, a piece of their history they assumed was gone forever. It just goes to show, you should never lose hope. Your package from Amazon might still show up in 2094. 3. Imagine this. You're in Los Angeles in 1995. You leave your wallet in a taxi, a classic frustrating mistake. You cancel your cards, get a new ID, and move on with your life. 3 years later, you're on the other side of the country in New York City. You hail a cab, get in, and there, sitting on the dashboard, is your old wallet. The driver says he found it years ago and just kept it as a reminder, to be honest. The odds of hailing the one specific cab out of thousands, 3 years later and 3,000 miles away, it's less of a coincidence and more like the universe is just showing off. 4. If you thought one taxi story was wild, get ready. In 1940, a cab driver in New York City saved a man's life by pulling him from the path of a speeding truck. Heroic, yes. End of story? Nope. 20 years later, the same pedestrian is now in Chicago. A car loses control and barrels right for him. Out of nowhere, he's yanked to safety by a cab driver. It was the exact same driver from 2 decades earlier. At this point, this isn't a cab driver. It's a guardian angel with a taxi license and an impeccable sense of timing who apparently likes to follow you around the country. 5. During the absolute misery of the Great Depression, a homeless man in New York finds a winning lottery ticket on the sidewalk. Now, most people in his situation would have seen this as a ticket out of poverty, no questions asked. But this man's integrity was richer than he was. He turned it into the police. The city held it for a full year, and when no one claimed it, they gave the winnings back to the finder. The jackpot was over $100,000, a king's ransom back then. It's a feel-good story that proves sometimes karma isn't a vengeful force, it's a financial advisor with a flair for the dramatic. 6. Some people are born under a lucky star. Violet Jessup was apparently born under an entire lucky galaxy. This woman was an ocean liner stewardess who survived the sinking of not 1, not 2, but 3 sister ships. She was on the RMS Olympic when it collided with another vessel. She was on the RMS Titanic when it had its infamous run-in with an iceberg. Then, for good measure, she was on the HMHS Britannic when it hit a sea mine and sank. They called her Miss Unsinkable. Honestly, if you saw her name on the crew manifest for your cruise, you'd probably just swim to your destination. It would be safer. 7. Here's one that will make you question the nature of time and memory. A couple from California was sifting through old photos when the wife found a childhood picture of herself at Disneyland. Cute, right? But then her husband looked closer. In the background, being pushed in a stroller, was him. They were captured in the same frame, just feet apart, a full 30 years before they would formally meet and get married. It's like destiny was playing the long game, planting Easter eggs in their childhoods. It makes you wonder how many future spouses we've all accidentally photobombed. 8. A woman in Michigan must have seriously angered a storm god in a past life. In 1973, she was driving when lightning struck a tree. which then fell and crushed her car. She survived. 1 year later, driving on the exact same stretch of road, it happened again. Lightning, tree, totaled car. By this point, you'd think she'd just avoid that road, or maybe cars or trees, or the entire state of Michigan, but the universe wasn't done. The following year, a lightning bolt hit her house. This isn't bad luck. This is a divine restraining order. 9. The Wild West had its own brand of brutal, long-form justice. The famous outlaw Jesse James was killed in 1882 by a member of his own gang, Robert Ford, who was hunting the bounty on James's head. But the story has a sequel. Years later, Ford himself was shot and killed in a saloon. The shooter was a man who absolutely idolized Jesse James and saw the killing as a righteous act of vengeance for his fallen hero. So, a criminal was killed by his friend, who was then killed by the criminal's fanboy. It's like a season finale of a gritty historical drama written by a lunatic. 10. On August 16, 1920, Cleveland Naps shortstop Ray Chapman was hit in the head by a pitch from Yankees pitcher Carl Mays. He died the next day, marking one of baseball's darkest moments. Now, fast forward exactly 50 years to the day, August 16, 1970. Carl Mays, now a scout, was watching a minor league game when a pitcher threw a fastball that struck a batter in the head in a terrifyingly similar incident. Thankfully, this player survived. But for a moment, time must have felt less like a line and more like a horrifying repeating loop for Carl Mays. 11. In 1943, a young boy almost drowned in Brooklyn but was saved by a quick-thinking stranger who pulled him from the water. Life went on. Decades later, that same boy, now a grown man, is in a restaurant, choking on a piece of food. As he's turning blue, a waiter rushes over and performs a perfect Heimlich maneuver, saving his life. Once he could breathe again, he looked up to thank the waiter and realized it was the very same man who had saved him from drowning as a child. This man wasn't a waiter. He was a professional lifesaver who just happened to be terrible at staying in touch. 12. The Kennedy-Lincoln connection is so bizarre it feels like a glitch in the Matrix. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. Both were succeeded by Southern Democrats named Johnson. Both were assassinated on a Friday. But it gets weirder. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who told him not to go to the theater. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln who told him not to go to Dallas. At this point, it's less of a coincidence and more of a historical script that someone is just recasting every 100 years. 13. In 1954, a businessman was absolutely livid. His flight was grounded with mechanical problems, and he was going to miss a huge meeting. He screamed at the airline staff, demanded a new flight, and generally made everyone's day worse. Eventually, he was rebooked. A few hours later, he learned that his original flight, the one he was practically fighting to get on, had crashed, killing everyone aboard. His anger probably evaporated pretty quickly. He reportedly sent the airline a thank you note. It's the ultimate proof that sometimes the universe's biggest inconveniences are actually its greatest protections. 14. A New York City cab driver was robbed at gunpoint in 1989. It was a traumatic experience that probably contributed to his decision to leave the profession. Years later, he's got a new, seemingly safer job, a corrections officer in a state prison. One day, he's doing his rounds, checking on inmates, when one of them calls out to him. The prisoner squints, a look of recognition on his face, and says, "Hey, didn't I rob you once?" You have to wonder what the proper workplace etiquette is for a situation like that. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. 15. Here's a story that blurs the line between victim and perpetrator in the most unsettling way. In 1953, a Swedish journalist was interviewing a man about his incredible survival story as a prisoner of war during World War II. The man described the terrifying Allied bombing raids on his POW camp. As the journalist listened to the details, the dates, the locations, a cold dread washed over him. He had to stop the interview and confess. During the war, he had been an Allied pilot, and he had been one of the pilots who dropped bombs on that very camp on those very days. Imagine that conversation. 16. Some people have a bad day. Tsutomu Yamaguchi had a historically bad week. In 1945, he was in Hiroshima on a business when the United States dropped the first atomic bomb. He survived the blast, albeit with serious injuries. He then did the only logical thing. He got out of the smoldering ruins of the city and went home. His home was Nagasaki. 3 days later, the second atomic bomb was dropped, and incredibly, he survived that one too. Yamaguchi didn't just survive 2 nuclear attacks. He went on to live to the ripe old age of 93, presumably spending the rest of his life avoiding any and all travel. 17. The police blotter in 1898. Illinois must have looked like a practical joke. Officers arrested 2 separate men for horse theft and brought them in for processing. Then things got weird. The first man was named Robert Lincoln. The second man? Also Robert Lincoln. They shared the same birthday. They even had fathers with the same first name. These 2 men, who had never met, were sitting in separate cells, convinced the cops were messing with them. It wasn't a prank. It was just proof that the universe sometimes gets lazy and hits copy-paste on its character creation screen, right down to the criminal records. 18. In 1998, an Ohio man won a $3 million lottery jackpot, the kind of event that usually calls for champagne and celebration. Instead, he told reporters he had a strange, sinking feeling that something terrible was about to happen. His intuition was disturbingly accurate. Just 1 month after his big win, he was arrested for major tax fraud. Within a year, the jackpot was gone, seized by the government, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. It turns out, winning the lottery wasn't his lucky break. It was just the universe turning on a very bright spotlight right before it lowered the boom. 19. A family in Florida had a dog appropriately named Lucky. Over the course of his long life, Lucky survived being hit by a car, falling off a multi-story roof, and even getting lost in the alligator-infested Everglades for 2 full weeks before finding his way home. When the seemingly invincible dog finally passed away of old age, his family bought him a tombstone that read, "The luckiest dog in the world." In a final cosmic punchline, lightning struck and shattered that very tombstone just 2 days after they placed it. The universe apparently has a very dark sense of humor. 20. We've all had moments of zoning out and typing nonsense. But in 1950, a New York journalist testing a new typewriter did something more. To see how it felt, he just started typing out a fictional news story from his imagination. A grim piece about a deadly passenger train crash just outside the city. A few hours later, the newsroom was in a frenzy. A real train had derailed in almost the exact location and in a hauntingly similar manner to his made-up story. His newspaper, recognizing the sheer strangeness of it all, printed his prediction and the actual news report side by side. 21. Getting hit by a meteorite is a 1 in a billion chance. So, for a single small town in Illinois, the odds must be getting personal. In 1928, a meteorite crashed into a farmer's field. In 1935, another one blasted through the roof of a local barn. Not to be left out, in 1950, a third meteorite came screaming from the heavens and smashed into a downtown store. Scientists have said the odds of this celestial targeting are practically incalculable. Residents, however, have a simpler explanation. The town is just a cosmic bullseye, and they've learned to keep an eye on the sky. 22. We often think history is shaped by grand armies and sweeping movements, but sometimes it pivots on the whims of a single, anonymous person with a vote. In 1845, 1 vote was all it took to annex the sprawling territory of Texas into the Union, forever changing the map of America. Just a few decades later, in 1876, a single vote in an electoral commission handed the presidency to Rutherford B. Hayes. And perhaps the most infuriating for anyone who has ever had to convert measurements, a single vote is what prevented the US from adopting the simple, logical metric system. So yes, you can thank one long-dead individual for the fact you still have to remember there are 5,280 feet in a mile. 23. It's the classic plot of a cheesy romantic comedy, except it actually happened. In 1987, 2 people were on a flight from Los Angeles to New York. They were strangers, but after chatting for a while, they made a shocking discovery. They had been inseparable best friends as children, but had lost touch completely for decades. The craziest part? Both of them were flying standby. They weren't supposed to be on that flight, let alone in the 2 seats randomly assigned right next to each other. Sometimes the universe doesn't just nudge people together. It shoves them into the same row and coach. 24. Some stories of coincidence are chilling, and this one is a sobering reminder of human resilience. In 2012, a woman was inside the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, during the tragic mass shooting, and she survived. 5 years later, in 2017, she was in Las Vegas attending the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival when another mass shooting unfolded. And again, she survived. To be at the center of two of the worst mass casualty events in modern American history and live to tell the tale is not a matter of luck or chance. It's a testament to a strength that is simply beyond comprehension. 25. You'd think the Library of Congress would know about every significant book in American history, but you'd be wrong. In 2013, a book surfaced that was so rare, no one even knew it existed. Someone had bought an old desk at a flea market, and hidden inside a secret compartment was a handwritten journal from a Union soldier during the Civil War. This wasn't just a diary of camp life. It contained detailed battle strategies and observations that historians had never seen, fundamentally rewriting parts of what we understood about certain campaigns. A major historical document just sitting in a desk for 150 years. 26. The Lincoln family seems to be a magnet for historical irony. A couple of years before his father's assassination, Robert Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son, was standing on a crowded train platform. He slipped and fell into the dangerous gap between the platform and the moving train. Suddenly, a hand grabbed him by the collar and pulled him to safety. His rescuer was Edwin Booth, one of the most famous and beloved actors of the era. Just 2 years later, it would be Edwin's brother, John Wilkes Booth, who would assassinate Robert's father. To be saved by one brother, only to have your family destroyed by the other, is a twist of fate too cruel for fiction. 27. In 2001, a New York firefighter heroically rescued an infant girl from a raging apartment fire, carrying her to safety. Life went on. 14 years later, in 2015, that same firefighter was on a rescue mission when a building collapsed, trapping him in the rubble. As he lay there injured, a team of first responders worked to free him. The paramedic, who ultimately pulled him out and began treating his injuries, was the very same baby girl he had saved all those years earlier, now grown up and working as an EMT. She wasn't just doing her job, she was repaying a debt. 28. Mark Twain, the great American writer and humorist, had a flair for the dramatic, and so did the universe he occupied. He was born in 1835, the same year Halley's Comet made its brilliant pass by Earth. He was keenly aware of this cosmic connection and famously, perhaps jokingly, predicted that he would go out with it. In 1910, 75 years later, as Halley's Comet once again blazed across the night sky, Mark Twain passed away. It was a perfectly timed exit, a final, poignant punchline delivered with celestial precision for one of history's greatest storytellers. 29. A small plane crashed into a Wisconsin lake in 1983, a tragic accident with only one survivor, a baby girl, found floating unharmed in the wreckage. 20 years passed. That baby girl, now a young woman, became a flight attendant, embracing the very thing that had marked her past. On one of her flights, she struck up a conversation with an elderly pilot who was a passenger. After she told him her incredible survival story, the man was stunned. He revealed that he had been the pilot of a different plane who had spotted the wreckage that day and coordinated the rescue that saved her life. 30. The Jim twins case is a story that completely short-circuits the nature versus nurture debate. Separated at birth and adopted by different families in Ohio, these identical twins met for the first time at age 39. The discoveries they made were staggering. Both of their adoptive parents had, without consulting each other, named them James. Both grew up to become police officers. Both loved carpentry. Both married women named Linda, had sons they named James Allen, got divorced, and later remarried women named Betty. They even owned the same breed of dog, which they had both named Toy. 31. In 1984, a woman in Texas was just trying to do her banking when an armed robber stormed in. Before the man could even make a demand, another customer in the line sprang into action, tackling the robber and holding him until police arrived. The woman was incredibly grateful for the heroic stranger who had saved the day. That is, until she got a closer look at him. With a dawning sense of horror, she realized her hero was the very same man who had mugged her at knife point 5 years earlier. He was a good Samaritan one day and a criminal the next. 32. Imagine being a soldier on the front lines of the American Revolutionary War in 1778. Tensions are high, cannons are loaded, and you are moments away from charging into a bloody battle. Suddenly, the sky begins to darken. A strange, unnatural twilight falls over the battlefield as the sun itself disappears, replaced by a black circle in the sky. This is exactly what happened when a total solar eclipse passed directly over the opposing armies. Both the American and British forces were so completely unnerved by this terrifying celestial omen that they simply stopped, called off the fight for the day, and stared at the sky in disbelief. 33. Some people have bad luck. A certain Florida man, however, seems to have a personal vendetta with the entire animal kingdom. In the span of a single year, he was bitten by a shark while swimming, attacked by a black bear while hiking, and then, just to complete the trifecta of terror, bitten by a rattlesnake in his own backyard. After surviving this onslaught of nature's fury, he calmly told reporters he probably wouldn't be doing much swimming or hiking in the near future. You have to admire his understatement. Most people would have just sealed themselves in a concrete bunker after the bear incident. 34. You can try to run from history, but sometimes it has your address. A man named Wilmer McLean owned a farm in Manassas, Virginia, in 1861. The first major land battle of the Civil War, the First Battle of Bull Run, took place right on his property, with cannonballs literally landing in his kitchen. Deciding he'd had enough of the war, he moved his family to a quiet, remote village called Appomattox Courthouse to escape the conflict. 4 years later, General Robert E. Lee formally surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant, effectively ending the war in the parlor of Wilmer McLean's new house. As he famously quipped, "The war began in my front yard and ended in my front parlor." 35. Ohio's state slogan should probably be, "The birthplace of people who defy gravity." In a mind-boggling coincidence of geography, the two most important sets of figures in the history of flight were born just 60 miles apart in Ohio. The Wright brothers, who invented the first successful airplane, hailed from Dayton. Just a short drive away is Wapakoneta, the hometown of Neil Armstrong, the first human to walk on the moon. The state that gave humanity its wings also gave it its first moonwalker. There must be something in the water there, and it's probably rocket fuel. 36. Your odds of being killed by a falling poodle are low, but never zero. In 1974, a Chicago man learned this the hard way. He was walking down the street when a poodle fell from a 13th floor apartment and landed directly on him, killing him instantly. But here's the truly bizarre part. Just moments before, 2 other pedestrians had walked through that exact spot, narrowly avoiding the plummeting dog. It's like the universe was taking a couple of practice shots before landing a direct hit. It's a tragic, freak accident that leaves you with one unsettling thought. You never know when your time is up, and you definitely never know when it'll be death by poodle. 37. The story of Violet Jessup surviving 3 shipwrecks is famous, but there's another unsinkable character from that era. Charles Lytler was the second officer on the RMS Titanic and was the most senior crew member to survive its sinking. But that wasn't his only brush with maritime disaster. He had also served as an officer on the Titanic's sister ship, the RMS Olympic, when it collided with a warship. As if that wasn't enough, during World War I, a ship he was commanding was torpedoed and sunk by a German U-boat. And yes, he survived that too. This man should have been legally barred from ever setting foot on a dock. 38. An American actor named Charles Francis Coughlin died in Galveston, Texas, in 1899. His body was placed in a lead-lined coffin and interred in a tomb. A year later, the Great Galveston Hurricane devastated the city, flooding the cemetery and washing his casket out into the Gulf of Mexico. For 8 years, his coffin drifted on the ocean currents. Then, in 1908, it washed ashore. The location? Near his birthplace on Prince Edward Island, Canada, over 2,000 miles away. The ocean itself decided to handle the funeral arrangements and delivered him home. 39. An Ohio woman was deep into a genealogy project in 2002, tracing her family roots, when she uncovered a piece of information that was a bit too close to home. She discovered that her husband, the man she had been married to for 15 happy years, was actually her long-lost cousin. They had grown up in different states, their families had lost touch, and neither of them had any clue they were related. They reportedly stayed married, but admitted to friends that family reunions had suddenly become a lot more weird and complicated. 40. A Louisiana woman was heartbroken after her wedding ring slipped off her finger while she was swimming in a lake. Despite days of searching, she accepted it was gone forever. 10 years passed. Her husband was fishing in that very same lake and reeled in a sizable catfish. When they got it home and began cleaning it for dinner, they felt something hard inside its stomach. There, preserved inside the fish, was her lost wedding ring. It's unclear if the fish had an affinity for shiny objects, or if it was just the world's most dedicated and slow-moving lost and found service. 41. It's the ultimate blame your brother defense, and in 1899, Texas, it didn't work. A man was on trial for murder, and his only argument was that his identical twin did it. The jury didn't buy it, and he was convicted and executed. A tragic miscarriage of justice, right? Well, the story gets darker. A full decade later, the man's twin brother, lying on his own deathbed, confessed to the crime. He had watched his innocent brother go to the gallows for a murder he committed, then enjoyed another 10 years of freedom. Now that's what I call a family secret. 42. In 1975, a man in Florida was relaxing on his porch when a stray bullet, seemingly from out of nowhere, struck him in the chest. He miraculously survived, but police were never able to determine where the shot came from. 10 years later, his son was sitting in the exact same chair on the exact same porch. In a horrifying case of déjà vu, he too was struck by a stray bullet in almost the same spot. Incredibly, he also survived. That family either has the worst luck in the world, or they live next door to the world's most careless marksman. 43. There's a pattern in American history so persistent it was dubbed the Curse of Tecumseh, or the Zero-Year Curse. Starting with William Henry Harrison, elected in 1840, every single U.S. president elected in a year, ending in a zero, died in office. Lincoln, 1860, Garfield, 1880, McKinley, 1900, Harding, 1920, Roosevelt, 1940, and Kennedy, 1960, all fit the pattern. The curse was finally broken when Ronald Reagan, elected in 1980, survived an assassination attempt in 1981. It's a statistical anomaly so chilling it made the Secret Service extra nervous for decades. 44. A woman in California was browsing a used bookstore in 2013 when she idly picked up an old book of poetry. She opened it to the first page and saw a handwritten inscription. It read, "To my future wife, whom I have not yet met, love always." Beneath the heartfelt message was a signature, the name of her husband. He had written the note years before they ever met, lost the book, and completely forgotten about it. She had just stumbled upon a message from her husband, sent to her from the past, before he even knew who she was. 45. On the morning of April 14, 1865, Abraham Lincoln dismissed his bodyguard's concerns, saying he didn't need extra security for his trip to Ford's Theater that evening. Hours later, he was assassinated. That date seems to hold a particular darkness for the 16th president. Exactly 95 years later, on April 14, 1960, a man was arrested after he tried to break into Lincoln's tomb in Springfield, Illinois. His goal? To steal Lincoln's body. It seems that even long after his death, the date April 14th just couldn't leave Abraham Lincoln alone. 46. This one is so perfectly tragic it sounds like an urban legend, but it's a documented fact. In 1974, a taxi driver in Bermuda accidentally struck and killed a man who was riding a moped. 1 year later, an almost impossible series of events unfolded. The same taxi driver, carrying the exact same passenger from the year before, was driving down the same street. He struck another man on a moped, killing him instantly. The second victim was the first victim's brother, and he was riding the very same moped. The universe, it seems, sometimes demands a sequel. 47. In his 1838 novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a chilling tale of 4 shipwrecked sailors who, facing starvation, decided to kill and eat their cabin boy. The cabin boy's name in the story was Richard Parker. Fast forward 46 years to 1884. A real-life yacht called the Mignonette sank, leaving 4 crew members stranded in a lifeboat. After weeks at sea, they made the gruesome decision to kill and eat their cabin boy to survive. The real cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. Life didn't just imitate art, it plagiarized it. 48. A Texas man was doing some shopping when he stopped dead in his tracks. Standing a few feet away was a man who looked exactly like him. Not just similar, but a perfect mirror image. They laughed about the incredible resemblance, snapped a photo together, and exchanged numbers. The uncanny feeling lingered, and a week later they both took DNA tests on a whim. The results came back, and the truth was stranger than either could have imagined. They were identical twins, separated at birth, who had been adopted by different families and had no idea the other existed until they randomly crossed paths in a store. 49. The CIA has tried some truly strange intelligence-gathering methods over the years, but Acoustic Kitty might be the most absurd. In the 1960s, they spent millions of dollars on a project to surgically implant listening devices and a transmitter into a cat, with the goal of releasing it near Soviet compounds to eavesdrop. After extensive training, the highly advanced multi-million-dollar spy cat was ready for its first mission. CIA agents drove it to a park near a Soviet meeting point, released it, and it was immediately hit and killed by a taxi. The project was, unsurprisingly, abandoned. So, reality is clearly stranger than fiction. But I'm willing to bet the universe isn't done pulling these stunts yet. Now it's your turn. Tell me the one unexplainable, statistically impossible coincidence that's happened in your life. Don't give me the boring stuff. Give me the story that makes you sound like you're lying. The best, weirdest stories get pinned. And while you're crafting that masterpiece, do us a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons. It keeps the lights on around here.